Well, hello, friends. My name is David Trotter. I'm the founder and publisher of Awaken Magazine, and I'm so excited to have three of our executive contributors with us today. We do this each Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 noon Eastern. Of course, you can always access these videos, these conversations on our YouTube channel, and we're streaming live on other platforms as well. Today's topic is healing generational trauma through conscious practices. And so I'm so honored to have with us today three incredible guests, and I'm going to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. So we've got Danae Huguenin, Crystal Culp-Cabbage, and Steve Burgess. They're coming from all different parts of the world. And so welcome, team. It is great to be with you.
It's good to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's just take a moment and allow each person to introduce themselves. And I'm curious, one, where you are located in the world, even though I know all three of you do work with clients globally. And then also, how are you serving our world? How would you describe what you do? All right. So Danae, would you mind going first?
Sure. So I'm in Colorado, and yes, I do serve people all over the world. I do psychic work that is many facets of it. I do a lot of reincarnational trauma, a lot of reincarnational karma. I basically help connect you back to your multidimensional self, medical intuitive work, animal communication, just so much stuff, hypnosis, lots and lots and lots of goodies.
Wonderful. Thank you, Danae.
Yes.
Crystal, how about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal Culp-Cabbage, and I'm located in Pennsylvania. But again, I also work with people all over the world virtually. I am a life, career, and leadership coach, and I specialize in healing trauma to help professional women create meaningful careers and also peaceful lives.
Thank you, Crystal. It's good to see you. Steve, introduce yourself.
I divide my time nowadays between Florida and the UK. And I'm in Florida right now, enjoying the sunshine. I'm a hypnotherapist who specializes in regression therapy. And my regression therapy is about taking clients back into this life traumas, past life traumas, and ancestral traumas in order to heal their issues. My sense in terms of serving humanity is that by doing this work, it's helping clients to become more balanced. And as clients become more balanced, the world becomes more balanced.
Thank you, Steve. Good to have you. Good to have all of you. And as a quick introduction, my name is David Trotter. As I mentioned, founder and publisher of Awaken Magazine. If you haven't subscribed, we encourage you to do that at awakenmagazine.com/subscribe. We present a variety of interviews and articles each week, amplifying the voices, magnifying the voices of conscious leaders, healers, and coaches. And so three of those executive contributors that we're so excited to amplify their message and their story are obviously with us today. I want to begin on this topic of generational trauma, maybe even just trying to define it. Like, how would you describe or define what generational trauma is for someone who maybe isn't familiar with it? And then also, as you define it, how does that impact our daily lives? So, Janae, would you mind going first for us?
Sure. So from my perspective, I feel like we have this idea that trauma is stuck in time. It's just this lifetime. Maybe it's the family, maybe it's the mother, maybe it's a relationship. And trauma has been embedded in us for so long. And I do not put a time stamp on, I hear a lot of people say, oh, we store 7 years in, our body or in our generation. And honestly, I have seen people back as far, like hundreds of thousands of years. And so I think we also need to start understanding that trauma is also stored in the land. It's not just in the body, it's also in the DNA. Yes, it's in the records, ancestral lineage, in the body, cellular level, it's in dates, it's in astrological alignments. There's a big spectrum on how we view trauma that has been greatly neglected. And so, I think it's best when dealing with trauma, generational trauma, to keep an open mind, because, this can go very, very, very far back. And I think people would be really surprised and shocked on how it shows up in the tiniest ways, including, just daily habits, people circling back into your life that maybe you haven't engaged with in 100 lifetimes or more. And so, it's important to keep an open mind when you're dealing with trauma, and having the patience, but also not just patience, but no judgment, because there's so much, we're fully loaded with so many things. And when you create an opening and an acceptance that there's a much bigger picture at hand, so much more information can come through, and so much more healing can be accomplished. And so, I think that's really important, because everyone's story looks different, right? And it's I find it really beautiful, really intriguing. So an open mind when going into this is so important.
Thank you, Danae. Appreciate that.
Yes.
How about you, Crystal? How would you define generational trauma and how it impacts our daily lives?
Sure. So I believe generational trauma affects us all, which I believe is what Danae is saying as well. And it is absolutely subtle. So many times when we think trauma, many people think of a major instance that's happened that caused a bunch of pain in this lifetime or another. And trauma could be just about everything that's influencing us. So I look at it as the thought patterns, emotions, behaviors, habits that are driving us on a subconscious level. And everything's not trauma, but a lot of it is. And it controls how we show up. It controls the decisions we make in our career, how we show up in our relationships, how we handle our stress, whether we handle it well or we do not handle it well, but basically all of our daily choices. And it can be overwhelming to think about that we have all of these influences, because so many of us as human beings with our egos, we want to be in control of all the choices that we're making and what affects us and how we protect ourselves. And it can be a little overwhelming and a little scary to think that there are things that we don't understand that are driving us. But there's a lot of empowerment in knowing that we can connect with ourselves and move through it, just like we connect with the things that we see in this world and move through them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Crystal, for giving me some power. I was starting to feel like, whew, I don't know. I'm starting to feel powerless. I got 100,000 years of trauma. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm trying to just get through today. Steve, talk to us. From your perspective, what is generational trauma? How does it impact us?
Well, my definition of trauma is anything that wobbles our energy field. Anything that happens that can upset us is a trauma. However, obviously some traumas are much more significant than others. And from an ancestral or genealogical perspective, I usually experience, my clients' experiences usually are significant traumas that are brought down from their ancestors' lives. So the concept is that if an ancestor is traumatized in their life in a major way, then that trauma can be passed down to subsequent generations. Now, generally, it's a genetic thing. You could say it's in the genes, in the DNA. However, I have also found in some cases that it's like an energy that can come down from an ancestor's life that is affecting us now. And so whatever the trauma is inside us. And that's inside us at a genetic level, at an energetic level. And it can be, in some cases, it's affecting us 24 hours a day, because whatever's in our subconscious is just affecting us 24 hours a day. Having said that, sometimes the traumas are more specific and will be connected to causing more specific issues now for us in our lifetimes. And a lot of my work is about releasing ancestral trauma in order to heal physical issues that my clients are actually are experiencing in their lifetimes now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Steve. So this past weekend, I was up at my parents' house celebrating their 54th wedding anniversary and my dad's 75th birthday. It's actually today. They got married on his birthday. And, I don't know if your guys' parents are still alive or those who raised you, but it is so fascinating each time I am with them, especially with my dad, to go, oh, yeah, I do that too. Oh, man. I mean, it's like every time. And I'm like, wow, I haven't been with you since I was 18 on a, right, on a daily basis. I see my parents, probably 4 times a year right now because we live a distance away. Why do I still do those things the way that you do them? So I'm just curious for each one of you before we dive into some of the more rigorous processing of how do we heal from generational trauma. I'm curious for each one of you, at what point did you start to discover personally that you were carrying something that wasn't necessarily like yours to begin with? Like it was somehow connected to your ancestral experiences, either in this lifetime or a previous one. Like at what point in your life did you go, oh, wow, this is weird. Like, why is this connected to me? Like, Steve, did you have a moment in your life where you started to realize that you were impacted by things of the past?
Yeah, certainly. There's two really, David. One was a pattern that, because patterns can come down through the generations. And certainly there's a pattern that my father did when he was younger, which traumatized him and the whole family. Subconsciously, I did the same thing later on in my adult life, which traumatized me and the whole family. So it was a similar experience. And it was years later when I became a therapist that I started to realize it was like this pattern was waiting in the air for me to fall into. So that was one thing. The second one was realizing my fear of lack, my fear of not having enough money, comes from my paternal grandmother and her husband, who, after the First World War, he came out of the British Army, having served in the Somme and having been gassed in the Somme. They had no money. They were broke, incredibly broke. And how on earth they survived straight after the First World War, I really don't know. And just briefly, as I mentioned that, of course, I've always been asthmatic. And whether my asthma is also, I say my asthma, the asthma, I'm not making claim of it, whether the asthma actually also is connected back to his being gassed on the Somme in the First World War. It could well be. I've not actually done any work on that. That's something else for me to work on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that, Steve. How about you, Crystal? Was there a time in your life where you became more aware of those patterns or experience that had been passed down?
Yes. Well, I was doing my own trauma healing for many years. And I got to a point where I hit a wall where some of the things that I was trying to heal just didn't make sense. I didn't have a reference point to validate myself and say, oh, it's this. And, in meditation, I realized that it wasn't related to me or directly related to me. And then I started to notice the difference between when I'm having a feeling or an energy running through me that is creating an impulse to do something that feels strong, which is mine, or something that feels almost conflicted. And when I feel the conflict, then I have the idea like, wait a minute, this may not be mine. This may not be all mine. And similar to Steve's example, one of the things that I've noticed the most for me is something I see a lot of my clients. And it's this conflict. Like, I want this. No, I don't. I want to change careers. I'm not sure I do. For me, it would be as simple as shopping. And I'm not talking high-end shopping. I want this shirt. No, I don't want the shirt. I think I should buy the shirt. I can't afford the shirt. I can afford the shirt. Why don't I think I can afford the shirt? Like in my head, standing there and realizing it's actually rooted in the poverty consciousness. Because my family was not privileged, especially several generations back. And under the poverty consciousness, what I've found is a strong level of undeserving. And so many times we think we hit roadblocks in our lives or our careers because we're afraid. But what I found is when you get through the fear, you have an unworthiness and an undeserving. And many generations back in almost all of our ancestral lines, there's times where we didn't have the luxuries that we have today. So we see very commonly a conflict between I can and I shouldn't. And a lot of times that shows up as that particular pattern. So then you sabotage yourself, you have a hard time making decisions, you stay places longer than you should, you put up with toxic behavior longer than you should because you don't feel like you deserve to have it easier, better, stronger, happier, more abundant.
Thank you so much for sharing that. gosh, I relate to that shirt situation. Oh my goodness. Danae, talk to us.
Yes.
At what point in your life did you become kind of aware of these things, these
Yes.
patterns for you?
It was, it's similar to Steve's. Like, it was just a matter of recognizing patterns. And I feel like, a lot of us who've been on this journey, this healing journey of ourselves, going within and just on the spiritual path, it's been part of our destiny, in a sense, purpose, to start acknowledging patterns, realizing things as part of the awakening process, right? Who am I? What is my surroundings? What am I existing in? What is this? And so when I really started, it was when I was younger, in my childhood, still living with my family, and really just observing their behaviors and really feeling to myself, this doesn't resonate with me, but I do realize I have some of these burn-offs from being raised in this, essentially, right? And so, as I grew older and made my own way in the world, it was more of that was, when you really separate yourself from a situation or dynamic that is clearly very unhealthy, and you start to say, wow, okay, you start to see behaviors more easily, more clearly, and they're loud, right? So you say, whoa, 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 where did that come from? And it's about that awareness, right? Being able to catch yourself in the moment. Okay, why was I triggered by that? Why did I react in that way? And having that emotional intelligence and regulation to say, okay, this is coming from somewhere else. And then when I really tapped into that, then it was, oh, okay, well, where did mom get that? Or where did dad get that? And then you start kind of trickling down to other people, other generations, and you start to see a much bigger story unfold. And that's been a really fascinating part is, and I talk to my clients about that a lot. I encourage 20 minutes a day, have a blank slate, right? I'm going to put all my beliefs aside, all these ideas, who I think I am, all these perceptions of self that have been projected on us through society, parents, teachers, all these things, right? Put that aside for 20 minutes a day and see what comes through. And I'm always shocked on how much comes through, when we can create a blank canvas and, start painting it ourselves. And I feel like that's important for people to remember, because it's hard sometimes to break these things, when they're really embedded, it's hard. So yeah, very fascinating.
Thank you, Danae. Thank you. I want to circle back to something that Crystal was touching on a moment ago, was trying to discern where that pattern or that feeling or that thing within us is coming from. And so, Crystal, I'd love if you might be able to elaborate on that a little bit, because I'm trying to think about, okay, is this a pattern that's in this lifetime, like something that's continuing? Is it something that is like from some far distant lifetime? And I don't know if that's something that you work on with your particular work. If it's not, that's fine. And then, or is it my own, just my own issue, something that wasn't passed down from a previous generation? So would you mind trying to help us discern that just a little bit?
Sure. And I think what Danae was just saying applies here as well, is it really comes down to self-awareness. And there's many of us that are highly intuitive, and then there's some people who consider themselves not intuitive at all. And that is something that you can work on. So the more you have a healthy relationship with yourself, which means you are loving of all parts of yourself, you are accepting all parts of yourself, you are forgiving all parts of yourself, you are not judging yourself harshly, the more you could work towards that, the better the level of trust you will have between you and what I call all parts of you. So I always encourage my clients not to consider yourself one being, but imagine that every age, every lifetime, every pain, every joy is all alive and well inside of you. And you want to have a strong, safe, comfortable relationship with those parts. So if you think of it like you want those parts of you, the past parts of you, to trust you and feel safe with you, you really can get to a place where you just question yourself and you say, is this mine? Is this something that I've created? What is this related to? Is this lifetime? Is this another lifetime? And personally, the way I operate is I don't have a big distinction between if we're healing this lifetime's trauma or another lifetime's trauma. So it's interesting to know where it's coming from, and it can be very validating and take a lot of pressure off to go, oh, I didn't create this myself. It's been going on for generations. But then also the way that I work on healing it does not greatly vary. So if you can't get the specifics of what is it and where did it come from, it doesn't mean that you can't heal it, in my opinion.
Hmm. Wonderful. And as a side note, I just want to give Crystal the award of the day for matching her blouse with our brand colors.
I love
So you win. And every time I talk to Crystal, I'm incredibly jealous of that painting because it just, even as you were talking today about, like taking a few minutes for 15 minutes, 20 minutes to create a blank canvas, I just am like, well, I would paint what Crystal has on her wall. That's what I would paint because I love that painting.
Yes.
So, Steve, how about you? How do we discern between, is this our lineage in this lifetime? Is it a previous lifetime? Is it something that I have caused? Does it even matter to discern between those three things?
I think it does, and the way I work with my clients, I created a regression system, and in that regression system, once my client is in trance, I ask the subconscious to take control of a finger, let's say, which moves all by itself. We call that an ideomotor response. So what I'm getting is what's called a yes/no. So the subconscious is signaling yes or it's signaling no. The client is just laid in trance while the finger moves all by itself. I then ask about the root causes of the issue, whether it's a phobia, an anxiety state, a physical illness, whatever, depression. Have there been any significant emotional events in this present lifetime connected to causing this issue? If we get a yes, well, we know there's some this life stuff. The next question, are there any past life causes, any traumas in any previous lives causing this issue? And we may get a yes. I'll then ask how many past lives. I'll count until the finger moves. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we now know we've got 3 past lives. Are there any ancestral traumas inherited from any ancestors' lives in your bloodline connected to causing the issue? If we get a yes, we then know we've got ancestral trauma. So usually in the first session, my client, we're diagnosing the roots of the issue. That can be an extraordinary relief for the client. They've suffered from this issue for many, many years, if not all of their lives, and they've been to see doctors and shrinks and whatever else, and finally they're starting to get some answers. At least I know this is my ancestors' stuff. I've inherited it, or it's past lives or whatever. So sometimes there's a combination. We have to work in this life, past lives, and ancestors' lives. But at least from that first session, we can find exactly where we need to go.
Wonderful. How about you, Janae? Do you find that it's important to differentiate between this life, generations, past lives, galactic lifetimes? Is it my issue?
Yeah. Is my screen frozen?
No, you're good.
Oh my gosh. Okay, it is on my end. Okay, so I honestly I love hearing Crystal and Steve's interpretation on this because it is so spot on, and that was very beautifully articulated, both of you. I just have to say that. And trauma, I love that. It could be anything, and so like how they went into the emotional, the physical, mental, all these things, spiritual, everything can carry over. And it's interesting too, 2 things I want to point out is people, I feel like when we get into this healing, especially of generational trauma, you think, oh my gosh, when are we going to be done? Is this going to be, I'm all healed. I've carried this wound. And now that's, we're never done learning. We're never done expanding. We're never done figuring out the little pieces of our much bigger puzzle. And that's a huge accomplishment in this life because we have access to so much. But even just, I want to segue into this part that I've seen a lot in my work is I've seen a lot of traumatic deaths in other lives. And so say someone was stabbed or killed on the battlefield, I've seen, puncture wounds, birthmarks, scars in places where no one was injured in their current life, but it's something that carried over. And even oftentimes someone has undiagnosable pain, like Steve was talking about, going to all these doctors trying to figure out medically what's wrong. And going into the energy, maybe 200 years ago, they were in battle and they died in battle, people who've been stabbed in the back, literally. Maybe in this life, they have people who, have regurgitatingly stabbed them in the back. And so not physically, but you know what I mean, figuratively speaking. And so it's interesting because when you get into the generational stuff, it doesn't come back the same way. It comes back in the way that's going to initiate and trigger that exact emotional response to bubble up that wound and then for it to be acknowledged, seen, heard, and healed. And so it's I love talking about this. I love talking about it.
Thank you, Danae.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the part that kind of like freaks me out and frustrates me and feels overwhelming. Culturally, I have kind of inherited and been told, well, let me start this. As a longtime follower of Christ, conservative Christian environment pastor, first thing we need to do is we just need to pray about it, right? And then we need to confess our sins, and then it's probably going to go away. And then he's like, well, that didn't work. Okay, well then the next thing I need to do is go to a therapist, and I need to talk about it forever at $150 to $250 an hour. And I'm just talking about it, and I can describe it from every single angle. I mean, I can tell you, how it impacts my life. It is still there, And so now I got Danae telling me I got 100,000 years of trauma. Obviously, I'm just messing with you, but it can feel overwhelming as an individual who is not educated, skilled, trained in this area. It can be like, man, I am just screwed for the rest of my life. I just don't know how to get rid of X, Y, and Z. So I'm just very curious now about talking about the specific modalities that you guys use, because I think you all kind of approach this similar but different, about how you help people. I think, as you said, Danae, something like acknowledge. What words that you just used? You just rattled them off real quick. Like acknowledge, see it, believe it, release it.
Yeah. Well, is that okay if I flow here for a minute?
So tell us how you specifically, in terms of the modality that you use to help people release this generational trauma.
Yeah. So 2 things. First off, systemically, we were not built for these type of things. Any healer that's gone into this has realized, wow, the system is lacking in a lot of ways. That's why a lot of people have not seen the process or the progress that they're looking for, because everything is looked at as so flat. Again, most people do not believe in reincarnation. They do not, believe in all of that. And they're really stuck in religious paradigms that keep them stuck in time. And that's just the truth. And so, outside of that, that is all changing, between all of us in this chat and many outside of this chat. And once you find a good healer, you won't have that issue. You know what I mean? You could have one session. I've had many clients say, Danae, I've been going to therapy for 30 years. I talked to you for an hour and I got more out of you than I did in 30 years. And so when you find a good healer and someone who knows what they're doing, someone who is clear, someone who is proficient in their talent, their craft, their magic, you won't have that issue. Do you know what I mean? Because they've done all the work on themselves. And what was the other question, David?
How do you actually help people heal this generational trauma? You just said they have a conversation with you for an hour, but I'm just curious about the way that you help people release this.
Yeah. So simplify it. I can come with the largest toolkit in the world, but if I have a client sitting in front of me that believes that they're stuck in time, that believes that they have to carry this, these suitcases for their entire life, I could do everything and anything and not allow that person to put down the luggage, so to speak. Do you understand what I'm saying? So a lot of it is us showing up, yes, holding the space, creating, the safety net. We have the knowledge, the gifts, the tools, but the person really has to show up and say, I believe in this. I believe in myself. I believe in what you're doing, what you're teaching. A lot of it comes down to the beliefs. We could bring anything to the table, but if the person doesn't believe it's possible, then that's where you're going to be stuck in time. That's what I believe.
Okay, so first step is the person has to have a belief.
Yes.
And are you, because I want to tease this out of you particularly, are you utilizing more of like a psychic gifts in order to intuitively kind of go back into this lifetime or previous lifetimes to understand what that issue is? Is that the primary modality that you help people with?
Yeah. So anytime, even if I'm not in session with someone, and when I meet someone, I start to see their multidimensional selves because I can see what they're connected to. So it's this whole really busy experience engaging with people. And so for me, it's psychically, I have the ability to read the timelines, the energy, because I understand that there's so much that bleeds through. There's so much that impacts us in the now. And so for me, I had been doing this even outside of this life. So for me, it was something very easy for me to pick up. So that is how I do that. Yes,
Awesome.
psychically. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. How about you, Crystal? As you're working with people, life, career, leadership, how do you help them like become aware of it, process it, release it, heal it?
I also rely heavily on my intuition in the beginning of the process, right? So when I meet with somebody, I have similar gifts to Danae, where I could see what's affecting them and where it's coming from. But I focus my work really on using that in the beginning to get them to heal enough to connect with themselves in a similar way, so that they could start to see within themselves the things that I could see up front when I'm talking to them. So a lot of the work that we do is healing their relationship with self up front, understanding how to see it and connect with that, so they could do a lot of the work on their own. And then when they hit the deeper triggers or the things where they get stuck, then they come back to me and say, okay, I'm not able to see around this. So that they are becoming gifted in the way that I feel I'm gifted through the process, as well as healing. And it really does depend. It sounds so cliche to say it depends, but it really does depend on the client. A lot of it has to do with somatic release. You know, when I started out in coaching, everything is mindset. And mindset's super important, but mindset does not acknowledge the fact that we've already had crappy mindsets in our life or in our ancestral line. And we have the emotions stored within our body that were repressed because of the old mindset. So a lot of it has to do with reframing the mind, but it has to do with somatic release of the emotions and providing whatever it is that that part of ourselves is needing. So 95% of what we think is subconscious. And when we were using things like affirmations, you know, trying to get our mind right, so to speak, we're only working with 5% of us, and we're working against 95% of what we are actually thinking on a deeper level. So doing the emotional work and really getting to the actual root is important. And one of my gifts intuitively is when I'm working with somebody, I'm able to identify the thought pattern and the emotion and where it came from right off the bat, so that we could go right to the root cause and not talk for session after session to try to figure out where it's coming from.
Wonderful. Thank you, Crystal. Steve, you were just describing your process of taking people into a trance state and then utilizing kind of the finger as a way for them to communicate with you. Because you've already kind of walked us through that, would you mind maybe even describing what some of your clients experience? Because you really are taking them, like they're verbally describing.
Yes.
Maybe tell us more about that.
And as Crystal just said, so much of this is somatic release. So the regression model is that all of our issues come from locked in feelings and emotions from past traumas. And it's about going into those traumas to release it. So we see a lot of tears, a lot of emotion coming through. Quite often it's a very kinesthetic releasing experience for the client as well. So they may be shaking, they may be moving or jerking. Very occasionally, and it is very occasionally, my client will be so in the experience that they may be screaming and yelling and writhing. Now that's unusual, but it does happen. And that sounds shocking for a lot of people, but when you know what you're doing, it's an amazing release. It gets the client better, fixed so quickly, because they've gone into that deep emotion, they've released it, they've taken the lid off the emotional pressure cooker and emptied the pressure cooker, often in 1 or 2 sessions. So that is extraordinary. Every issue that we have as human beings from the regression model comes from locked in feelings and emotions from past traumas. So whether it's depression, lack of confidence, etc. Yesterday I was working with a client with her allergies. So I've been working with her for a little while with headaches. She's had headaches and migraines for like 40 odd years. We've released the headache. She's gone back into past life. She's gone back into ancestors' lives. And looking at that from an ancestral perspective, in one of the ancestors' lives several generations ago, she was a woman who fell and broke her neck. And of course, she has neck problems, which lead to the headaches in this lifetime. In another ancestor's life, this is a male ancestor, probably, I think, 5 generations back. He was badly beaten in the middle of a street somewhere in an old town in America, and kicked. His head was beaten and his face was smashed up. So, of course, and I often find with migraines that the cause of migraines are either deaths in past lives where there's been blows to the head, or some head injuries at some stage in the past. And so this was coming from her ancestors' lives. Yesterday, we were working with her allergies, and we went into her great-great-grandmother's life 4 generations ago on her mother's side, who had TB and tuberculosis. And she experienced in trance, laying in a hospital bed for some time, or a sanatorium bed, with other people dying around her. And she was about 4 or 5 years old, this little girl, while this was happening. But that's traumatic enough, with people dying around you. Parents were not allowed in the sanatorium because obviously they didn't want to bring germs in. And so this poor young child just had to live for some months with this illness, just laying in a bed 24 hours a day, feeling awful. So that releasing took place, and later on in the session there was some asthmatic response as well, so we released that. In the previous session, we'd gone back into her mother's life, who also has allergies, when her mother was a child. And in the session, whilst she was in her mother's it was basically, her mother was in a farm, and there was hay everywhere, and so she was just coughing and coughing and coughing and coughing, and that somatic release of the coughing was reliving her mother's coughing and the trauma. She was also brushing her arms and itching her arms all the way through the session like this, because the poor child was the skin was on fire. So that's an example of somatic releasing.
That is amazing. Let me jump in here with a question regarding someone's experience, because basically, to make it clear, as they're in trance, they are seeing things and verbally articulating what they are seeing. So you're not telling them what they went through. They're telling you what they're seeing.
Yes.
How do you know if they're just making this up in their minds as imagination, because it's just a stream of consciousness, versus they're actually seeing something in a past life? How do you know the difference?
More often than not, you don't, because we're not looking for specific information. And of course, if we're looking from an ancestral perspective, these people are dead, and very often there's no record of them. What happens, though, is when the client experiences trauma from, let's say, their parents or grandparents, they can then verify that later on. And just as a very unpleasant example, some years ago, I had a client who re-experienced, while she was in trance, her mother being sexually abused as a child by the grandfather, by her mother's father. Her mother had never spoken about that throughout the course of her life. So after the session, my client met with her mom and said, "This has come through in a session, Mom." And the mom said, "Yes, I know about that. I don't want to talk about it." So in those terms, it can be verified. But to be honest, when it's further back, there's no way of verifying it. The beauty of it, though, it doesn't matter, because it still gets the client better.
I'm curious about the role of forgiveness in this process. I don't even know if that's an important. Is that important? No.
Can I break it? Can I jump in there?
Yeah, I mean, is there any
I'm
need
sure
to
the
bring it
ladies
up?
will I'm sure the ladies will disagree with me. Forgiveness for me is an F word, so we don't use it.
Okay, tell me why.
Forgiveness will naturally happen when the client is healed. I hear lots of therapists who go on and on about getting the client to forgive, getting the client to forgive. What can happen is that will create an artificial forgiveness, which isn't deep enough, or the client fully can't forgive, and so therefore they feel more guilty. So I actually leave forgiveness out of the equation. In my opinion, it will naturally happen when the client is healed. But that's my process.
Okay. Anybody want to take a different take? Yes, Danae.
So I am in alignment with Steve, and I want to take that a little further too, because when you start to deal with reincarnation and you start to really expand your beliefs about life, about the afterlife, about the spirit world, about the soul, the journey, the soul, all these things, you start to realize, wow, I planned everything out. And I decided, oh my gosh, I am going to take on these wounds. I am going to take on this karma. I am going to, and if you don't like karma, then cause and effect, right? So I am going to take all this on so that I can allow a healing to take place, not only within myself, but within, the genetic line. And I think once you also understand the part you played in these wounds. So I've dealt with people, I also do hypnotherapy too. When you really get into a lot of this, when I've done really severe trauma readings on people, whatever modality I've used, I have always found when I get to the genesis point that they themselves have done the same behavior in another life. And so when you start to understand the complexities to being alive and how detailed and expanded it is, then it's very humbling, right? It's very, oh, so I agreed to this. And when you start to accept that you played a major role in what you're experiencing, it makes it very hard to continue to blame anyone else other than yourself. So there's that layer to it as well. And and then once you get to the point of forgiveness, it doesn't have to be for the other person, right? It is for yourself. But I don't feel like forgiveness is something that can be forced. I am in alignment with Steve. It's something that naturally, beautifully unfolds as you're doing and committing to the work with yourself.
Okay, so we have 2 out of 3 that said nobody needs to forgive. Screw all those people that hurt you.
Can I say one more thing? I'm sorry, it'll be quick. If you are in a place where you do not forgive, okay, because forgiveness is part of it. That's how you release the wound. And if you get to a point that you don't forgive, you can, when you eventually decease, you can come back and repeat the lesson, because when you don't add the value of forgiveness, you're missing something. There's something missing in the lesson. And so you can set yourself up to repeat it again. So I do want to say that.
Okay. Once again, more encouragement from Janae. No, it sounds true. Okay, Crystal, are you going to have us writing "I forgive" 10 times on a chalkboard to help us forgive someone, or do you agree?
Yeah, I don't agree, and I do agree. And I think it really comes down to everybody has a different definition of what forgiveness means, right? So I believe that in order to heal and have the healing flow, that we need to have a healing mindset. And part of the healing mindset is understanding a lot of the things that Danae said. These are all patterns. And part of forgiveness is, what is my responsibility in this? I don't believe anybody could get to forgiveness if they're in a victim mindset. We have to say, here's what I did, and here's what you did. See the dark, see the light, and come at everything from a place of neutrality. If we don't have forgiveness for ourselves, which maybe it's not forgiveness, maybe it's more empathy and understanding, but the more forgiveness we have for ourselves and the accepting, the more intuitive we're going to be, because the more we are going to cooperate with ourselves for our healing. The parts of us that need our attention will trust us and share with us, in my opinion. As far as family members and who has wronged us, obviously the severity of the trauma makes forgiveness either easier or more difficult, depending on what has happened. And but if we could look at each person in our lives as light and dark, they're not good, they're not bad, it just is. Yes. Then we forgive on a global level everyone for everything, because we're all just particles bouncing around in this energetic matrix, doing good things and doing not so good things. So that mindset, I think, is crucial, because I've seen people hit walls in their healing because they have a hard time accepting something that was done that was dark, for example, from somebody that they absolutely idolize. So if they're like, no, I can't even imagine that came from my grandmother. She was the best. She was so loving. It's like, if we could come to acceptance that she was, and she also had a lot of challenges, and those challenges played down, and we could come to a place of, again, whether it's forgiveness or neutrality or acceptance, then we're not so resistant. I believe if we look at our family as really, really bad or dark, like look what they did to me kind of mentality, then we are going to probably have a self-inflated sense of self, because we're not taking enough responsibility. And the opposite is also true. If we look at our family like, they were the best, I absolutely love them, we're probably way too hard on ourselves, because we're blaming ourselves for problems that didn't start with us. So seeing everything very neutrally and and coming at forgiveness like we're all human. And then if there are sticking points that the trauma needs to be healed for those major traumas, then the forgiveness will come naturally.
Thank you for sharing that, Crystal. I don't know if anything changed on your end. Your audio got a little challenging to hear on that answer. If nothing, I'm not quite sure. But we got it. We got what you said. I am curious about helping us. And Crystal, you were segueing into this, so I want to have maybe a couple of the others speak to this. Is how do we view our ancestry? How do we I think that there can be a tendency to either like look down on either especially our most recent parts of our lineage, to go, oh, my parents or my grandparents, or man, they really messed up, or and I have disdain there. Or the other direction, like, oh, my family's amazing and it's perfect. And I'm sure people have a continuum there. But how do we somehow honor our ancestry, appreciating where we came from, but at the same time recognizing I have to be responsible for my own life and take like my own steps forward? How do we navigate that, especially when parents are still alive and perhaps have different views than we do? Right? How do we honor like our ancestry? Danae, I know you've worked through some of this.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts that you'd want to share?
Sure. So I also think, again, it's going to come down to your beliefs, right? Do you believe that going through ancestral healing has to be hard, or can it be expansive? Can it be power is knowledge? Can it be, freeing, liberating, all of these things? And so, when you start to get into this and you have the right mindset, again, I know we've talked a lot about this through all of us, but having the right mindset will really carry you a long way. And also believing that you're not stuck in time, because you are an ancestor. So, to sit here and say, oh, 100 years ago, grandma did this and blah, blah, blah is irrelevant, because you're part of the piece. And so, I really think in accepting that, yes, you may be the one that has gone through the trenches and really, gutted yourself in some ways to really bring all this up. Let's bring it up to the surface. Let's heal it. Let's be brave. Let's be courageous and resilient with it, right? But also accepting that as you do the work, two things are going to happen. The people who maybe created, helped gift you the wound may never change. But by you doing the work, there's this beautiful thing that happens is you create an opening. You create an opening in the genetic line or family line, whatever. And even though it may appear that someone, in your family line isn't changing, you may start to see small things shift, whether it's responses or behaviors or, addictions. You will start to see, through your efforts, things will shift in dynamics and in people, and they may not realize it. They may not acknowledge it or verbalize it, but you do create an opening so that the genetic line isn't so stuck in time. Your work does matter, and you do not even have to say anything. You are a powerhouse. If you are someone who is taking on this type of lifestyle and these belief systems, whatever, you are a power seat, because long after you're gone, you are creating a situation where souls that are going to come in have more to work with. There's been an opening there that was maybe had been locked down for a very long time. So there's power in that,
Thank you. Steve, do you believe that our healing or transformation in this lifetime impacts our ancestors or our descendants? Do you believe that's the case, or do you think it's more about us here in this life?
First of all, I think what Danae was just saying there was magnificent, and I agreed 100% with everything you said. That was really beautiful. And it will lead into that. My belief, first of all, is you've got to work on yourself. One of my catchphrases nowadays is about doing the work. We need to do the work on ourselves, because as we heal, the world heals. From an ancestral genetic perspective, as we're doing the work on ourselves, we are releasing our stuff, our emotional stuff, as I call it. I'm a Yorkshire lad from England, so we call it stuff. We're releasing that. That will have an effect on our descendants. We are releasing it so that they don't carry our trauma. So I think that's very important from that perspective. From a ancestral perspective, of course, I mean, the shamanic view is that the ancestors are always there, and that by working on ourselves, we are healing our ancestors. Often they say about up to 7 generations back. How true that is, nobody really knows. But in all honesty, I think it's worth having an open mind and saying, well, maybe that is true. And if it is true, then that's another good reason for doing the work on yourself now.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, it has been an incredible conversation with the three of you. You are so gifted at what you do. And so I want people to hear how they can work with you and where they can reach out to follow you, whether your website or social media. Crystal, do you mind sharing how can people connect with you and work with you?
Sure. So I work with professional women, as I stated, and the first thing that we do is we have a deep dive coaching session to get to the root cause of whatever's challenging them. Usually it's something related to their work environment or a soul searching question of what's the next step in my career or in my life, or how do I make sure that the generational trauma that I've experienced does not pass on to my children, because a lot of us are mothers. And the best thing to do is to book a first session with me, which is complimentary. And that's on my website at seekingasenseofpurpose.com. And you'll also find a link to my social media channels on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn on the website as well.
seekingasenseofpurpose.com. And once this video goes as replay, we'll put all these links in the description as well. So Crystal, thank you so much for being with us. Just what amazing wisdom that you have shared. And plus, thank you for dressing on brand.
I really didn't try that.
And always having an amazing painting in the background. Danae, how about you? What are the ways that people can work with you, and where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so my website is always the best. It's readingswithdanae.com. My Instagram is Danae for Humanity. I always just tell people to come exactly as you are. You're going to get a lot of what you wanted and so much more of what you did not even know you needed. And so, I do a lot of different, I know I've talked to you a lot about this, David. I do a lot of different things. So you don't even have to have a purpose or an idea of what you want. Just book an appointment and you're going to get a list of things, whole pages sometimes of, things you didn't even know, things to work on, homework, whatever it is. Really, with me, expect the unexpected. I'm kind of the, like the comment you made earlier about me, I'm the reality check that people need but don't always want. So I give you a lot of things. There's a lot of compassion. I have a lot of love. It's family to me, even if you're a stranger. So, come exactly as you are is what's necessary.
I love that. Hold on. I want to get that catchphrase on your website. What is the reality check you didn't know you needed? Is that it?
Yeah, and you don't always want.
And you
It's
don't
reality
always
check
want.
you need, but you don't always want it. But that's me.
You didn't pay for it. It's a bonus. I
Yeah.
just give it to you as a bonus.
It's a gift.
That's wonderful. And what you said is you do exude love. Yeah. And so even with that reality check, it feels loving that
and it's safe. I really do. I understand how shocking some of the things that can come through. So also feeling safe and creating that trust is so important, because when someone trusts you, they can really relax, they can surrender, and so much more can be, pulled out. And so that's also incredibly, it's a non-negotiable. It has to happen. It has to be that way.
Wonderful. Thank you, Danae.
Yes.
Steve, what are the ways that people can work with you, and where can they connect?
Okay, my website is steveburgesshypnosis.com. steveburgesshypnosis.com. My YouTube channel is Hypno for All, HYPNO, the number 4 ALL. What I've got on there are actually 26 free hypnotherapy recordings, audio recordings, to help people with all manner of issues. Because I really believe that therapy shouldn't be an elitist experience. And of course, not everybody can afford to have therapy. So this is a way for people, to have hypnotherapy and hopefully heal in some way for free if they can't afford it, or B, actually get used to having a bit of hypnotherapy and experiencing what it actually is and how natural it is and how normal it is. So that's Hypno for All. My Facebook is The Power of Past Life Regression. And my new book, The Adventures of a Hypnotherapist, was published just a few weeks ago. So that's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, etc., etc.
And people can, of course, book a session with you on your website.
They can come through the website to get hold of me. I am extraordinarily busy, so I have a bit of a waiting list, but people can get hold of me. And I have a team of therapists who I've trained, and they, people, if they don't want to wait for me, can see one of my team.
Yeah. And if you have not watched one of Steve's sessions, he does on his YouTube channel have a session with a client, obviously with their permission, where you see them go back into past lives. It was very fascinating to watch. So I encourage you to check that out on Steve's website. So thank you, Steve, for being with us today. All of you, what a wonderful conversation. This has probably been one of my favorites that we've had so far. I just deeply appreciate each one of you and what you're bringing to the world. And you're so unique. You're so, like, you're all, wanting to heal generational trauma, and you're all so unique in the way that you do it and the flavor that you bring to the table, but it's all just flowing with love. So I appreciate you guys. I encourage you, those of you who are watching or listening, whether it's live or via replay, as I mentioned, we do these Rise and Shine live streams each Wednesday, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 noon Eastern. And so you can find them on our YouTube channel. There's a Rise and Shine YouTube playlist where you can find the previous conversations that have been wonderful as well. So we'll be back here next week. So, all right, until next time.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.